The giant lifts his mighty warhammer and brings it down on your breastplate, crushing you and killing you. Oh, come on, this sucks, man. I barely got to use any of my character's abilities. Like, it just didn't work for any of the situations we were in. Yeah, and all those homebrew rules, they were so confusing and just so annoying. Yeah, I just wanted a light-hearted social game, you know, not this hardcore gritty survival. This is a situation that could have been easily avoided had they just had a session 0. Hey everyone, welcome to The Grit and Glory, where we learn how to improve the gaming experience. If you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and of course subscribe. But now, onto the video. Today I'll be showing you why and how to run a session 0. But before I get into that, I'll explain what exactly a session 0 is. In short, it's a session that predates the campaign. It's where everyone can lay out their boundaries and their expectations. The GM can explain the setting, any homebrew rules they want to implement, and overall how difficult the campaign is going to be. It's basically just organization of the campaign, and it's a great place to set in stone any schedule that you want if you haven't done that already. Sadly, the reason I actually even need to explain that is because DnD, the biggest TTRPG in the world, doesn't give any framework or guidance on what a session 0 is, and especially none on how to run one. And this really sucks because I know of many groups, I've read about them online or seen them personally, that fizzled out and died because they didn't have a session 0. They had no clear vision of what the campaign was and where it was heading. And this is no individual person's fault. If you come to a campaign with a joke, silly character, but the GM wanted it to be a more serious, gritty, realistic game, that's not your fault, that's not their fault. It's really a fault of the system not showing you how to communicate properly. TTRPGs are literally communication games. If you don't communicate everything all the time, the game falls apart. Which is why it's truly astonishing to me that D&D doesn't give any advice on this vital part of communication. Which is why in Grit and Glory we have a full section of the book dedicated to the session 0 and to communication generally. Why it's so important and helping newbies get used to this type of game.
Oh my god! Wow!
You understand what a session 0 is, let me explain why you need one.
Okay.
A session 0, in short, is the foundation of collaborative storytelling. It allows the GM to explain the campaign setting and the mood and the theme of the campaign from the very beginning. And it allows for the players to have input there. They can suggest changes or suggest the ways that they might want the campaign to flow, the type of game that they want to play.
Okay.
It also allows for world building between players and the GM, and it just allows the game to flourish and grow from the very beginning. Say for example, a player wants to play an orcish nomad whose tribe was slain by some evil cult. Another player comes to you and says, hey, I want to play this mage sword fighter who was experimented on by this cult of undeath that gave him powers until one day he escaped. And he's being hunted by them. This first player hears about that second player and then says, you know what, could that cult that experimented on him be the same one that killed my tribe? And boom, suddenly you have a connection between your two players and a BBEG. And as a GM, you had to do nothing to get such a great reward. This actually happened in one of my campaigns that I've been running for the past 6 years. It was excellent, and that cult has become the BBG of the entire campaign, and every character is now truly invested in murderizing them as quick as possible. But it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have that session 0 to get those two players interlinked from the very beginning. A session 0 is also a great way for newbies or less confident players to build tangible connections to the world and bring more depth into their character. What sounds better? Hey, build a character, I suppose. I don't know, man. Yeah. Any help? Okay, so here's my world. Up here we have the Fire Nomads. They're a really dangerous group of people that kill anyone that gets in their way. Down here we have the Elvish Empire, a fledgling empire that's just starting on their imperial march. But north of them there are the roaming Orcish hordes holding them back at every set of expansion. Over here we have the Forever Forest, a forest so deep and dense that it said civilization could never penetrate it. That sounds so cool. What if, okay, I have an idea. What if my character was some kind of like druidish kind of wood elf that grew up on the borders of that forever forest, you know, and they got really connected with nature, but they never really knew much about the outside. And then one day they heard about that elven empire that's formed, yeah? And they've decided that they want to get so good at fighting so that they can kill all those orcs and help the empire expand and build a safe place for all these elves, right? And the great thing is that this to and fro doesn't just have to happen between GM and player. It can happen between the players themselves. I once had two players come together after reading the pantheon I presented to them. They looked at it and they found a god they loved so much they both decided to become dedicated followers to that deity. One of them, a noble paladin who'd been raised by a cleric and lived and breathed the faith since they were a little boy. The other, he was an Ashborn, a creation of the deity himself, made from the ashes of a dragon that literally came to life because of his deep faith. And yes, that Ashborn I spoke about is a homebrew race that I made with the character in that session 0, which is another reason why they're so important. Because if your player wants to make something that's not in the core rules, you can build that with them right then and there. This was so amazing because it allowed me to build a campaign and a structure that I knew would interest both of them. Any plot hook that I knew could get one of them, the other one would happily jump along and join in. They were already tied together as characters as well as players. Now enough about my campaigns, let's talk about one you actually heard about. Critical Role. I have to say I am a massive fan of the first season. Although, admittedly, I haven't finished the second or third one yet. I really want to, but they're super long and life gets in the way. But, yep. So anyway, back to Critical Role. We have really good examples of this kind of pre-campaign planning and joining the characters together. For example, Vax and Vex, literally twins that grew up together. You can't get more interconnected than that. But we also have more personal and deep story related connections, like Pike and Grog. Grog getting kicked out of his tribe for saving Pike's grandfather, and her saving his life with magic. That is such a deep bond that those characters share. You can really see it in how they roleplay together throughout the rest of the campaign. And it's something that the GM could never create. It's something only that could be built on by the players themselves. This type of pre-campaign bonding is so helpful for GMs, especially newbies. I know personally loads of my friends who have tried to GM find it really difficult to make an organic start to a campaign where you can bring 4 to 5 strangers together in a group. It's like they didn't know each other 10 seconds ago, so why would they die for each other now? But that is all alleviated so easily with a session 0, because maybe they weren't strangers 10 seconds ago. Maybe they were, but even if they were, maybe you've found a way to weave the story into all of their backstories in that session 0.
What the hell?
But one of the biggest reasons that you absolutely need a session 0 is because the biggest killer of all D&D campaigns isn't Vecna or Orcus or Strahd, it's scheduling. I don't know of a campaign that's fizzled out without having scheduling issues along with it.
What?
And a session 0 is a great way to set these rules in stone and set up an actual schedule that you can see working for everyone long term. Is weekly good? Bi-weekly or monthly? Something that can actually work for everyone. How long are the sessions going to be? 3 hours, 5 hours, longer, shorter? What happens if someone can't show up? Is it online? Is it in person? All of this kind of stuff is really important and valuable things to know. And it can sound boring and clerical, but that is what keeps campaigns alive. Think about Critical Role again for a second. Why do you think that they've finished season 1 and they finished season 2 and they've finished season 3, I think? I don't know, I've not caught up, leave me alone. But why do you think that is, that they always get to the end of these seasons? It's because they're held to a strict schedule. They have to adhere to it. And yes, obviously they are paid professionals and you aren't, but if you want your campaign to succeed and flourish and thrive, you have to at least try and set some rules and boundaries to get everyone to adhere to. It's literally what keeps 99% of campaigns alive or causes them to die. But that's so boring, man. I just want to play. Yes, you're right. It can be really, really boring if done incorrectly. But that's why I'm here, to show you how to do it correctly. Now we've got on from the why, let's move on to the how, which is arguably more important, but it's also a lot simpler. How to run a session 0 is so easy. It's just that people have never been taught it by D&D, so people assume it's complicated. The problem is with D&D's character creation system, it really skews people's perceptions of how a session 0 can go. They hear that you build a character in a session 0, and you do, but that doesn't really work very well with D&D's system. We all know that friend who has about 700 characters on D&D Beyond, and that's great. I'm probably one of them, admittedly, because character creation is super fun. The thing is, that's nothing to do with D&D. That's just a general trend in anything that can create characters. How do I know this? Because I look at other TTRPGs that I play and my friends play, and the trends are just the exact same. And looking at certain video games where you can create similar kinds of characters, the trends are even more massive there. So what is my problem with D&D's character creation system if it's so similar to every other system? Well, the problem is that it's not part of the game. It's almost like it's a separate little mini game you have to complete, like a tutorial before you can get to the actual game. What? And the biggest problem with it is that it's a completely solo venture. Not only does it take hours sometimes looking through the different books and the different abilities, but you do it all alone. And yes, it is your character, you should have control over it, but like I said, TTRPGs, they're cooperative games, they're collaborative games. It shouldn't be just a bunch of people sitting at a table, all working on their own things, not talking to each other. And that's what the system for D&D does encourage, sadly. And in essence, for a player, that is the focus of a session 0. Collaborative character creation. It allows for you to work together with your friends and with your GM to make a character that's interesting and tied together with the world and with the other player characters. It can make the game so much more fun and interesting, and make character creation itself actually more fun and interesting. This is where the level 0 game comes in. In Grit and Glory, there are 2 types of level 0 game. The first one is what D&D characters would be way more familiar with. You come in and you make one character. You give them an ancestry and a background, maybe a paragraph about their history.
A few moments later.
And then the game begins. But what about my class and like bringing the party together, man? I said the game has begun. Don't worry about that stuff. Your characters are roaming around the world. They're doing their own thing. Whether they know each other, whether they don't, they're just chilling. And then suddenly the orcs attack the city. Or maybe the lich raises the undead. Or maybe the dragon comes flying in, burning the city to the ground, and kobolds flood the street. Whatever it is, there is suddenly an overwhelming danger, a threat that your characters are going to have to run away from. The great thing about level 0 is that your characters are basically just ordinary people.
Oh, thank God.
So this threat, even if it is goblins or kobolds, is a massive, massive threat. They're going to have to run for their lives if they want to survive, and avoid all forms of conflict unless they all gang up on one goblin. And the great thing about this is that your characters don't just have the spell button or the attack button. They have to think creatively. They have to think on their feet and, you know, find creative, complex solutions to escaping this danger.
Oh, for hell.
That is my personal favorite way to start a level 0 game, but you don't have to start it that way. You can start it like any other ordinary game. Some examples could be:
the king has disappeared, and his son, the new king, has placed a 10,000 gold reward on finding him and bringing him back alive. There's a festival going on, and everyone in the city is invited, including your players, because 2 of the most major families in the Empire are getting married. An outlaw has been captured, and he's about to be executed in the city square. The only problem? He's innocent.
Sure, you could start your game like this without a session 0, And yeah, it could work, but you're gambling on your characters and players not caring. Maybe they don't care about the king or the wedding or the outlaw. But if you have a session 0 beforehand, you can build your players' characters with them and get them invested in the story beforehand. Maybe they know the king, or maybe they know why he's gone missing. Maybe they know about the wedding and what it actually means for the empire. Maybe there's a war brewing and that's why it's happening. Maybe they know the outlaw personally, or if they don't, maybe they're the reason he's being executed. Whatever reason, they are now invested in the story, and the players will be pulling themselves towards it rather than you having to drag them into it.
That was awesome!
So I did say there were 2 types of level 0 games. The second type is called the funnel game. It's a type that Dungeon Crawl Classic players will be very familiar with. Every player makes 3 to 5 characters. That's going to be so much work! 3 to 5? That's going to take hours! Well, no, not really, actually. That's because every character that you make is basically a blank canvas. You have your ancestry, your background, maybe a sentence on 2 on their history, their relatives, their family, whatever you want. But you don't put much investment in them. And that's because they're gonna die.
What?
Probably. Very likely. If you make 5 characters, expect maybe 1 or 2 of them to survive. And I think that this is obvious to most people that hear they're going to make 5 characters. You can't play 5 characters for an entire campaign, right? Well, I say can't, but with the Grit and Glory sidekick rules that you can see a video up there explaining, you could definitely manage it. In a funnel game, you kind of have to have an overwhelming threat unless somehow the dinner party becomes a murder party or what have you. But regardless, a lot of the characters are going to die, and that's what you should tell the players going into it. Make 3 to 5 characters, expect 1, maybe 2 of them to survive, and those are the characters that you'll develop further. This not only brings your entire party together, because sure, they might have been strangers before, but they're working together now because they're all going to die if they don't, but it also allows you to build up the characters naturally. You've got a background, a sentence or 2 for them, and thinking about that, how they would react in such a situation, allows you to sculpt their future path in the abilities that they take. Maybe one of your characters picked up a warhammer off the ground and smacked a goblin in the face with it, knocking him over so he could run out the door. Boom, suddenly he's a fighter wielding a giant warhammer into battle. Maybe one of your characters avoided the fight completely and snuck around the side. Maybe that means they're a rogue, assassin, excellent at stealth. Maybe one of your characters looked and found a magical item or an artifact, or they deciphered some kind of puzzle in order to escape. Maybe they're a very intelligent character. Whatever it is, you don't have to base it off of an event that happens in the campaign or in that session 0, but it is great as inspiration for building a character organically. And it drastically cuts down the hours and hours you spend actually making a character and allows you to just play the game. The fact that you can build a character not by selecting different buttons on a screen, but by actually thinking organically about how they would react to the world is my favorite part about a level 0 game. A classic example of a level 0 game is the prison escape. Whether your characters have been arrested by the king because they are outlaws, or they've been arrested by a bunch of gnolls as prisoners and probably food later on, it doesn't matter. There has to be some kind of incident inviting a prison escape, whether that's pirates attacking the king and blowing down the wall like in Pirates of the Caribbean, or it's a band of orcs attacking the gnolls and in the chaos the prisons get broken into. Or maybe your players themselves decide that they're going to start a prison revolution. A prison revolt, and they're going to escape themselves. Whatever the reason, your characters are going to try and escape, and like in all level 0 games, most of them will fail, but the ones that do now have an excellent beginning and a launch off for the campaign. The setting, the environment, it doesn't really matter. All the examples I've given are just that, examples, and you don't have to stick to them. The important part is that you're actually building characters together rather than sitting separately on a table making your own thing in your own screen. So the next time that you're going to have a campaign, think about setting up a session 0. Trust me, your friends and your campaign will thank you for it in the long run. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, check out the website in the description below where you'll find details about the Kickstarter that's going live in September, so make sure to back it. And in the meantime, you can check out my Patreon for more exclusive content, or for YouTube content, you can look here.